You are listening to the podcast When Life Gives You Lemons, presented by me, Emma Levy. Having worked with elite athletes for most of my career, it's always intrigued me that a significant number of high-performing individuals have encountered some form of adversity earlier in their lifetime. My fascination into this grew when I had my own brush with adversity, when I was diagnosed with breast cancer in May 2020, in the midst of the global pandemic at the age of only 36. During this period, I questioned whether it was my positive mindset, or maybe something deeper, which enabled me to bounce back and to train and compete for a triathlon just 1 month following completion of all active cancer treatment. The goal of this podcast is to explore this concept further by meeting a variety of high-performing individuals who have experienced adversity, but who have come back stronger. Today I'm welcoming Erin Kennedy MBE to the podcast. Erin is the coxswain with the GB rowing team, currently steering the mixed four of the Paralympic rowing squad. Erin is the Paralympic gold champion, 2-time world champion, 3-time European champion, and World Cup winner, and she is actually the first cox to ever hold these 4 titles at any one time. What's even more remarkable about this list is that Erin achieved some of these victories with breast cancer. In May 2022, Erin was diagnosed with triple-negative breast cancer. 4 days after her cancer diagnosis, she won a gold medal at the World Cup, and then a few months later, she coxed the crew to victory in the 2022 European Championships, which was part way through her chemotherapy. She continued to train and compete for the GB rowing team despite her diagnosis and during her treatment, and throughout the process, Erin bravely shared her cancer journey online to raise awareness of breast cancer, the importance of early detection, and the importance of living life joyfully despite a diagnosis. Erin, so good to meet you today, and thank you for chatting with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Brilliant. So all of those achievements, being Paralympic, gold champion, 2-time world champion, 3-time European champion, World Cup winner, being the first cox to ever hold these 4 titles at any one time, I imagine following Tokyo Paralympic Games, you were riding quite a high wave. You were only 29. How did it feel to get that cancer diagnosis and worry that all of that was potentially being taken away from you?
Yeah, it was pretty rough, to be honest. I think I've sort of reflected on it, and really one of the kind of early things I sort of thought when I first got diagnosed was, okay, what about rowing? Like, what about my career? And it was less about almost my own mortality, but just about like what happens after this. And yeah, it's something that, I felt really fit and healthy. I felt really well. Tokyo was a weird experience, as it was with anyone who went. It was a real bizarre COVID games. And I was just sort of enjoying the world opening up again, and I felt really healthy. And yeah, it just sort of came out of the blue. And so it was really scary thinking, do you know what, this might actually be, might be it. I might never compete internationally again. And that was one of the motivations for actually going out and competing the weekend after I got diagnosed.
So tell us about your diagnosis, because as a young girl, I don't know how you came about being diagnosed.
Yeah, so I was actually on training camp. So I found a lump on training camp just while I was in the shower. I was checking fairly, routinely. I have had a history of breast cancer in my family. I now know that there's the BRCA gene in my family, but we didn't actually know that at the time. And I just found a lump, and it's one of those where, when you find something, you can't then not notice it. Mm-hmm. With whatever you're doing, getting changed, showering, putting on moisturizer, it just feels like it grows, when you first touch it and you're like, oh, is that something? It goes from like a kidney bean to like an orange. Yeah. And yeah, so I contacted through my team doctor. We had about 10 days between coming back from a training camp and going away to competition. So I needed a quick turnaround to go and get checked. So I had some biopsies, and they essentially said, oh, we need to schedule a follow-up appointment. And they wanted to schedule it the day I was due to fly to Serbia. So I said, oh, can we do this any earlier? And they were like, well, we need to make sure the test results are back. Like, okay, right. So I chatted to my squad. I was like, can I fly out a day late? How do you feel about it? And they were like, yeah, no, that's fine. But what if it's bad news? And I was like, well, think I'll still want to race, because what else am I going to do? Just sit home and feel sorry for myself. And so weirdly, I think maybe did I start processing it before?
Or do you think you were questioning whether, or did you ever think it was going to be breast cancer?
Not really, no. In all honesty, like I'd had one lump checked twice before, and it had been nothing. And even when I went to see the oncologist, he kind of did the original examination, and then I'd had the ultrasound and biopsy, and the sonographer, radiographer, I'm not sure which one it is, but they basically said, they grade them from 1 to 5, and 5 is definitely cancer, and 1 is this is definitely fine, and I think it was a 2, which is this is almost certainly fine, but let's just double check, sort of thing. And thankfully I had gone and got it checked. Thankfully they did decide to biopsy it. And one of the reasons they decided to biopsy it is a general rule: if you're under 30 and presenting a lump, it's worth doing anyway, sort of thing.
Wow, lucky.
So yeah, quite a few kind of circumstances and good fortune and being proactive essentially led to the diagnosis. And thank goodness it did, because with triple negative, it's not a great. No, breast cancer is good, but it's probably not your top one that you choose.
Yeah, you just want to catch it early as well, don't you?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a similar story about my diagnosis, in that I was so sure it wasn't cancer that when they booked me in for an ultrasound, I cycled to the appointment, which was like a 45-minute hilly cycle, unaware that the appointment was going to involve a biopsy. So when I turned up at the appointment with all my cycle gear, they were like, "You cycled here? Are you going to cycle home?" I was like, "Yeah, of course I am." And they were like, "Okay." And I remember them kind of looking at each other, and then after the biopsy, they literally strapped me up, and I was like, okay. that was not an easy cycle home, let me tell you.
I imagine it was.
No, with like 3 puncture wounds, that was not a highlight. But I think, when you're young and you don't necessarily consider that it is going to be the bad news. And I'm so fascinated by individuals' grit and resilience. And for me, your story does truly epitomise resilience. So I need to ask you, how did you bring yourself to get on a plane and join your team and compete just 4 days after your diagnosis of breast cancer?
I think there was definitely a bit of kind of, there was a huge amount of compartmentalization, which I think borders on denial. So I came out of the appointment, my husband was with me, we told our parents respectively, and then I told my team doctor and my chief coach. And then I was like, right, okay, let's be practical here. What do I need? And I was flying the next day. And I was like, right, we need to get my parents over, because we need to kind of literally rip the Band-Aid off that one. And I got my in-laws over as well, where they don't live too far away. And I text my teammates and I was like, right, this is what I know and this is what I need from you, because I was aware this was impacting more people than just me. And then I just literally just blocked everything out. Like, I was just like, right, I might not race. I just need to enjoy this. And I went to the competition, and actually not many people there actually knew. There was maybe, of the sort of 80, 90 members of the GB rowing team out there, 10 to 15 knew, which was great for me, because it meant for them, I just flew out a day late. Some people didn't even notice I'd flown out a day late, in all honesty. They're all focusing on their own thing. The only way, actually, it was really annoying. So I flew out with not the normal team doctor. There was like a second team doctor on my flight and the sports psychologist. And I remember queuing at, going to the VA check-in, and she was like 4 people in front of me. And I was like, oh, hell no, I am not queuing next to you, because you are gonna, I didn't know if she knew. And if she did, she'd try and psychology me. And I was like, no, I'm not talking to you. So I literally like hang back and was like keeping my head down. We were in like GV kit as well. So I was like,
you couldn't hide.
Literally, like, she got away in front of me and I was like, I'm just gonna take my time through departures. I'm not gonna go anywhere near. And thankfully we weren't sat next to each other. But I was like, literally noise cancelling headphones on. I'm not talking to anyone. And then I just tried to really just focus on the rowing and not spending a lot of time on my own. I went to bed at about 2 or 3 a.m. during that whole competition, which is terrible for a sports person. But I wanted to be really knackered when I went and put my head on the pillow. I didn't want it to be like, so I watched, not very relaxing, watched a lot of Luther.
Okay.
Just very distracting, you know, and I just basically kept, and then the Formula One was on that weekend. So when we weren't at the course or racing, I was like, let's watch Formula One. And obviously at that point, everyone's like, keep Erin happy. Okay.
So you literally didn't talk to anyone for those few days. You said to your teammates, I don't want to talk about it. Let's just push it aside and let's just get on with the job.
Yeah, pretty much. And obviously, like I was, you know, checking in with my husband. I actually felt awful about leaving him. I actually felt really bad. And his brother came up from Cornwall to like hang out with him for the weekend, which was really nice. I don't think they had that fun of a weekend. And he, bless him, did the kind of the worst job, I think, of when you get a diagnosis like this, is telling people, because like it's so hard. And also, like, whilst I definitely didn't expect a diagnosis, we at least knew I'd gone for a checkup. You know, there was a little bit of teeing yourself up, whereas people that you just sort of let them know semi out of the blue, it's like, what? And that's really tough. So I'd say that's probably the worst bit of kind of a cancer diagnosis. Is everyone talks about the meeting when you find out you have cancer. For me, I don't think that was the worst bit. I think the worst bit was waiting to have chemo and not knowing what that bit looked like, how I would feel, what it would feel like, what all those sorts of things, and having to tell people. And that for 4 or 5 weeks, I think, was for me the kind of the worst bit.
Yeah, it's the anticipation, isn't it? And you can't plan for something. You don't know how you're going to feel and how you're going to be. But then once you're in it and you kind of have control of it, you can control the controllables, basically.
Yeah, 100%.
So you won gold at that World Cup. You come home, you've got your horrible weight. You then started chemotherapy, I believe, and you continued training. And then 2022 European Championships, you were chosen for the team, and you went out during chemotherapy and you won a gold medal. So having been through chemo myself, I know how challenging it can be to get out of bed and walk around the block. So how did you do that? Not just physically, but emotionally as well. How did you manage that one?
I think it was having a goal, having something to work towards. So I was on EC at the time. I don't know if you had EC.
I luckily didn't, but I have heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
good,
Red
good
Devil.
dodge.
Is that the Red Devil?
Yeah, the Red Devil. Yeah. Doesn't help. Everyone tells you that's what it's called before.
People love to tell you the bad stuff, don't they?
They totally do. Oh man, I think it's a bit like when people have babies.
Yeah.
People love. No one says, "Yeah, I had a pretty good birth and my child is good 9 days out of 10." Everyone's like, "Oh my gosh," and people are like that with cancer. It was not fun. But I had 2 rounds of chemo by the time I'd gone to the World Cup, and I think for me it was routine. The thing I struggled with the most in lockdown, and in all honesty, I didn't actually have a bad lockdown. I generally, enjoyed probably having to force to slow down a bit once I knew the games were postponed, not cancelled. There was still something to aim for and all that sort of thing. And my husband and I were been together 10 years before we got married, but we'd never lived together. And so we literally got married in December 2019.
Wow.
And so we were actually just kind of having a nice time living together and all of this, and that sort of gave me maybe a dry run of what do I need in a crisis, what do I need in this, and the pandemic sort of taught me, like, I like routine. I like seeing people. I get my energy from others. They definitely sort of top me up, and so I thought, you know what, if I just stop everything, I think that's going to be really bad for my mental health. And knowing that, I don't need to be kind of pushing myself physically. Like, I stopped lifting weights and things like that, because I was like, I'm going to be asking my body to do a lot. I don't think lifting heavy weights and asking muscles to repair is a good thing to do, but I can still do cardio. I can still move, things like that. And so I kind of mentally created these structures and these goals, and Europeans became a really big one for me. it was going to be dictated a lot of how did I respond on chemo, really. And I wouldn't have pushed for Euros if I was really poorly on chemo. I think the thing that chemo probably gave me the most was brain fog, which I found really hard, particularly later on in my treatment. At Euros, it wasn't too bad, but it was just sort of managing those side effects and things and giving myself something to aim for. I slept a lot. I kind of cut out all the other things that you do in life. And I kind of was like, I knew that Euros would be my last international competition of the year. So almost lots of other things could wait until the other side of it. I just was going to focus on getting there. And yeah, I'm so glad I did. And it was, I always thought kind of Tokyo would be my biggest achievement, but I think that Europeans will probably always be the race for me.
How did it feel as you crossed the line and won that race?
Oh, so emotional. It was really emotional because I knew it was the last for a while, or maybe ever, just because the reality also was, we were treating to cure. I was stage 2, so I was in a good place, that it hadn't, as far as we knew, spread to the lymph nodes and metastasized anywhere else. But the reality was, I still needed to get through my chemo and have a double mastectomy. And with a shorter Olympic cycle, really, I needed to be back in a boat by spring 23 to be selectable for this summer and really next summer. Because, 2 years out of the boat in a 3-year Olympic cycle doesn't really work. And so, yeah, it was really, really emotional. And like, my parents were there, my husband was there, some friends. It was almost like the Tokyo that never was. It was, it was a big weekend.
And do you think the emotion within your teammates kind of helped to propel your boat to victory as well? Because I can imagine they were all feeling fairly fueled and fired up to go.
Yeah, I made a call maybe 600 to go or something, and I was like, I hadn't really used it a lot, but I was sort of like, do it for me or something like this. No. And Ed in my squad, it was a race is 2K, and he was like, I can't believe you got that one out of the bag with 600 meters to go. He was like, we had so much race left. Don't use that now.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, no, it was good, and then my teammates were amazing, and I kind of so grateful for them, because I think that's where, being part of a team sport's amazing. They just kind of backed me.
Yeah.
It was a pretty nuts suggestion that I was like, yeah, I think I could do it. They're like, okay.
Yeah. Because without the support from them, I imagine you wouldn't have been able to do it.
No. And if any of them had been reluctant, same with my coaches and stuff, then I would be thinking, okay, am I doing this for the right reasons? Am I doing this selfishly just because I want to do it? But actually, is this right for the squad? Is this right for the team? And I needed to be a bit objective about it. And that's sort of where it got to with the World Championships, because really, I really wanted to do them. I didn't want to step back. But the World Champs, it wasn't just the World Champs, it was the training camps before and all of that. And I was moving on to weekly treatment. And aside from anything else, just the logistics wouldn't have worked. And it would have been too much pressure on the team, even though probably I was fit enough and well enough to do it. It was too much on the edge. There was too much at stake. And again, I think that would be where it tipped from it being the right thing for the team to it being the right thing for me. Yeah. And that was a very hard decision to step back.
Yeah, but then since getting the all clear, am I right in saying you're now back on the team, and you recently won the 2023 European Championships, which is your 3rd European title. So you kind of really, I suppose, told cancer to F off there. How did that one feel as you finished just now?
It was emotional, but in a really different way. I'm pretty level, I'd say. I've probably cried during this whole experience less than 10 times, just because I'm a processor. And I would also say that generally I don't cry, but I nap. If things are getting a bit much, I'll be like, I'm gonna have sleep. I'm just gonna have sleep now. Some people would be like, I just need to cry this out and get on with it. I'm like, I need to sleep this off and then get on with it, and yeah, and Euros, you couldn't literally, if you're writing a book about this, it would just, people would go, oh, that's a bit far-fetched, because the start of the competition, the first day of the competition, was a year to the day I was diagnosed.
Oh wow.
Which is just like nuts.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and I got selected, and that was amazing, and I was so excited. I was also rowing in Lake Bled in Slovenia, which is like a sort of bucket list rowing venue. We don't go very often. The last time they were there was about 12 years ago. So
wow.
Some people in their whole career will never race there. So it was just this beautiful venue, and it felt really surreal, in all honesty. Being around the boat park, being back in that environment, it's a real buzz, and it was really exciting. And then to race, and we actually didn't have the best run-in performance-wise, so it was a little bit like, I think maybe, I don't know, weirdly, maybe that was a good thing. I was so distracted about actually doing my job. I wasn't really thinking about everything else.
Yeah.
And then we crossed the finish line, and I was a mess. I was burst into tears. Frankie sits behind me, like, gave me a hug, and then we come onto the pontoon, and I just, through all of the press, I'm just crying the whole time. And it was just really overwhelming, because I think it was kind of like the stamp on the, like, I'm back, like, and yes, I'm a lot more tired than I was before, and I've got a lot more lines and a lot less hair, and my whole body's changed and everything, but like, it really felt like, okay, like, this is what we've been working towards.
Yeah. So that was a whole year's worth of tears, basically, that you hadn't shed, came out all at once.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you've shared your journey on social media, and I've seen that you've been on TV, radio, speaking very eloquently in your wake. And it's not easy to be so openly vulnerable in these difficult moments, and it's not an easy subject to talk about. So how do you seemingly do it without getting too emotional? Because you do make it look very easy.
No, thanks. I think I decided to start talking about it on social media, basically because, well, I firstly didn't really know anyone else of that age who'd gone through cancer. And I really, really didn't think it would have happened to me. And I thought, well, if I didn't think it would happen to me, I feel like that's probably, the average feeling of your 29-year-old, that you don't ever think this will happen to you. Plus, throw in that I was super fit and healthy, and all of those sorts of things. And I also thought, do you know what, like, I am bricking it here because I don't know what's coming. And I've got people I know, friends and family, like my mother-in-law, aunties, people who have had cancer, had chemo, had mastectomies, had all these things, and I could not tell you more than what I probably know from TV about it. And I thought, well, I'm going to sort of share my experiences as we go, maybe try and make it a little bit less scary for people and actually help people understand, but also, most importantly, try and raise awareness that it can happen. And ultimately, the only reason that I found my lump was through proactive checking. Weirdly, I had a mammogram on the day I was diagnosed, and it doesn't show up. It was completely clear.
Oh, you had a so you had a clear mammogram.
Yeah. Because breast tissue is denser premenopausal, and
I had the same. I had a clear mammogram and clear ultrasound actually initially.
Did you? Wow.
Yeah, so it's quite important that people know, I suppose, if they have a gut feeling that something isn't right.
Yeah, they should just go and check. And I think, particularly in the first month or two, I was just, I was kind of sharing because it helped me process, and also really good way of keeping people up to date with what's going on without having to have the same conversation 25 times.
Yeah.
Just be like, just check out my Instagram, let's see what's going on. And then the European Champs, I did an interview with BBC, and it went nuts. Like, I did like every major, BBC, Channel 4, ITV, Channel 5, Sky, CNN. It started going like global, and it was mental. And I was just like, I was having a really weird conversation. They were like, we'd love you to come on this morning. I was like, yeah, I'm having chemo on Thursday. And they're like, oh, is there any chance? I'm like, no, the reason you want to talk to me is because of this, but I need chemo. Like, what? And it was crazy. And it made me realize like how much cancer resonates with people. But also like we need, I don't like to use like word role model, but just like people, when I was originally diagnosed, I looked around for people to get confidence from, and like to give you that, okay, maybe it will be okay.
Yeah.
And I think there is quite a lot on social media which is quite draining, and it's not like I wanted to give out a false impression of what it was, but I also wanted to just give a real impression of what it was and an actual lived experience. And I sort of have kind of gravitated towards others who have had that positive mindset. And I think the athlete mindset has definitely helped me as well, just to kind of reframe things.
Yeah, but you've done, I think, a great job of sharing that lived experience. But have you found that challenging, sharing it publicly?
I think what I've found weird is I don't think I'm that aware of how open I've been until then someone said something and I'm like, oh, you know that. Oh, I told you that. Yeah. But I think if I'm honest, I haven't found it too difficult, because one, I think it's really important, and two, it's actually quite cathartic. And the number of people who've said to me, this is really interesting, I feel like I actually understand. And I get a lot of DMs and messages from people who are like, oh, my mum had breast cancer but never really talked about it, now I really feel I understand, or that sort of thing. And like it's amazing how many shared experiences there are. Like you and I, we had potentially different types of breast cancers, different experiences, different chemos, but we sort of get it. And I think that's really powerful. And I think it's just been something that I think it's really, really important to talk about, because it's real life, unfortunately. And whilst, like I hope that, a lot of these people listening to this will not be touched by cancer in their lifetime. Unfortunately, 1 in 2 will. So if it's not you, you will know someone very close to you, and maybe it can help you support them in some way and help you understand what they're going through.
Yeah, well, they say it's the club no one wants to be part of, don't they? But once you're in that club, it's a very supportive club. And in series 1 of this podcast, I had Carly Musa on it. I don't know if you know her. She's another breast cancer advocate. But she was always kind of 3 weeks ahead of. We went through breast cancer at the same time, and she was always kind of 3 weeks ahead of me. So I did the opposite to you, and I came off social media because I found it quite challenging being on it and seeing, well, other people and other people's experiences. But I told Carly in the episode I would go and check where she was at before everything I did. I would check Carly's page to see kind of her advice and how she managed it and if she gave any extra tips. So, there's the supportive side of social media, which can be so helpful. And like you said, just showing the honest side and the truth of it, because sometimes it can be, well, in TV programs and all that, can be a bit portrayed a bit different, should we say, to the reality of how it actually is.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like I'd say I definitely get really annoyed. I don't, watch tons of telly, but when I do, they need to write off a character. They're like, cancer, and you're like, there's more ways that, like, think more outside the box, guys. Like I used to find it all the time, and now I just notice it. But yeah, Carly's amazing, and she's got BRCA as well, and has done amazing things in the kind of BRCA community for people who, like my sister, for example, has BRCA gene, and I hope will never be touched by cancer. But there's that whole other side of kind of it as well. And again, like you say, there's that really positive side of social media, or there's that side that can be a bit scary. And I definitely unfollowed quite a lot of things in my first couple of weeks after panicking and following people, and then I was like, oh no, I don't want to do that.
Not for me. Because you seem like such a positive and an optimistic person, even despite these challenging times you've been through. How do you think you've maintained that optimism? And I mean, can you share any tips with our listeners?
Yeah, I think that basically really, really early on, my husband and I decided that we were never ever going to say this isn't fair. I think we were like, that's just never going to be a helpful rhetoric for us. And it is what it is. Like I personally am a Christian, and I kind of had a really great conversation with someone from my church who said, instead of saying why me, like woe is me, just think, oh, why me? Like what can I do about this? And that for me has been really helpful. But for those who kind of going through this who don't have a faith, it would be, for me, it's kind of with kind of constantly kind of reframing, it will just make your life better. Like and I think this goes for when you're in a really dark place. If you have been diagnosed with something, it's also looking at you know, in those times when you're like, what is like, why is this happening, what is going on, and actually trying to kind of practice gratitude, even for the smallest of things, really, really helped kind of build positivity and optimism. You know, and like really silly things actually probably annoyed me the most, which was like, chemo, you lose all your hair. That's really annoying. But you lose your nose hair. Ah, that's so annoying. Having cancer in the winter sucks because your nose is just like pouring. And so instead of just being like, this is outrageous, like I just laughed about it on social media, and I was like, right, does anyone have like any contacts at Kleenex? Like we need to start like getting like tissues to cancer services and all this sort of thing. And like, and then, and you know, and you just end up loads of people DMing me being like, I know, it's so annoying. And like, and almost then you end up with this shared, like, you know, almost amusing pity party for ourselves about our runny noses, rather than, you know, some of the bigger, more heavy things. Like you can't control them. And also, you know, even if it is really, really rubbish, it's having that gratitude for the people around you, because you know, it takes a village, really. Like, and I think for the people who are going through cancer, it's really rough. It's so much so for the partners, and if they have children, and the parents and things like that. And you know, and I'm terrible at accepting help, and I had to really try hard to accept help for me, but also for them, because people want to help you. And trying to kind of bring people into your circle and surround yourself with really good people.
Yeah, I don't know if you've read the books by Edith Egar, the Holocaust survivor. So she writes, you know, don't say why me, but say what now. And I read that during my recovery, and that really hit home for me. You know, not why. It's kind of just stepping away from the victim mindset, isn't it? So not why me, but what now. And I think that's just super, super helpful.
Yeah.
Erin, tell me, what does sport mean to you?
Sport means so much to me, because I think it's about the people. I think that Tokyo was a very revealing experience, because it made you really think about, why are you doing this? You know, you're not doing it for the crowds. You're not doing it for the, you know, glory or whatever perception of, you know, standing on the top of the podium and everyone cheering and singing the national anthem. There was no one singing the national anthem in Tokyo. You know, it was just us trying to desperately hit the right key. And actually it was all about the people and the team, and what we were doing for each other, and, you know, what we put our bodies through to kind of make a boat go from A to B as fast as possible, which in the grand scheme of like someone running alongside the boat, not that fast, you know. And it's something that just is amazing, and I think can really bring people together. And I think that's why I love sport, because we had Henley Royal Regatta quite recently, and I look you know, down the riverbank, and it's chock block full of people who are competing at every level, from school to masters, and everything in between. And we're all kind of unified by the love of this sport. And I just love seeing people love sport and enjoy watching it. And I think it's, for me, it's such a wonderful way to kind of have community with people, whether you're doing that on a Thursday night netball or, you know, at a professional level. It should always be fun, and it should always be about the people, because I think they're the kind of things that really keep you loving.
Yeah. So do you think your recent experience with cancer has made you a better athlete?
Yeah, definitely. I think I don't sweat the small stuff anymore.
Hmm.
And I think I have a lot of respect for my body. Um, Really interesting sort of relationship with my body. I think I hadn't really thought about it. Like I knew how important it was, but when your health all of a sudden is sort of taken away from you and or at risk,
Mm.
it makes you really appreciate like, wow, my body's pretty amazing. And even going through chemo, I was literally looking at the nurses double gloving to like touch this liquid, which is going to be put straight into my veins. And you're like, what? They're like, oh gosh, don't let it touch me. And they're like, here you are. And the fact that like my body can take that and process that and put up a fight, and it really was, yeah, it was pretty amazing. And so I think it's really made me kind of respect my body and what it can do, and how lucky I am to kind of get to do this as a job.
Yeah. So has that led you to kind of do anything tangibly different in life in terms of respecting your body more? Have you changed any practices or anything?
I'm trying to I was always kind of like really aware of what I was eating, but I think it's really, I mean, chemo forces you, even if you don't want to really think about gut health. um, Chemo is like taking the world's worst antibiotics, but washing it down with bleach, essentially. Like it was not fun on my stomach. And that's something that I've actually tried to be really proactive of, is kind of like trying to eat a more diverse range of things in a week, making sure I'm actually, everyone talks about your 5 a day, but who actually is eating 5 a day? I'm trying to, and trying to kind of look after definitely like my digestive health actually, because I mean, aside from actually practically needing to, I found it just makes me feel a lot better. Um,
Yeah.
and also, I was always, to be fair, very good with looking after my skin, but again, it's made me really appreciate that, because chemo made me really photosensitive. So especially I'm in outdoor sport, really, really proactive on sun cream, and I'm also like sun cream police with all my
Yeah.
teammates now as
Yeah,
well.
I'm the same. I will only go outside with factor 50 on now, which is,
Yeah,
I used to be the one like lathering myself up in oil.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And now I'm like, no. And then little 19-year-olds in my team, I'm like, turn around, don't do your back.
Yeah. And you talked about practicing gratitude, but are there any other specific strategies which you've used which you think have helped drive you forward?
Um, I write a lot of things down. I think it started originally when I was doing kind of the social media stuff, because I was needing to articulate myself in a certain number of characters essentially on Instagram. But I have started writing things down. Like I always kept a training diary, but it was quite practical. It was sort of, this is the training I did today. This is what I was working on. Whereas I'm now sort of trying to kind of goal set a little bit more, and that's sort of playing into that gratitude as well. So thinking about, okay, what am I grateful for? How is it going? And I used to, with all my training days, I'd mark it out of 10. So sort of how good was that day, like in terms of towards my long-term goal. But now I've started thinking a little bit more about, okay, how good would this day about the long-term goal? But like, was it a good day? Did I enjoy it? Like, did I do things that I really enjoyed? And you can do that in your everyday. Like, if you've got a pants day, and you've got loads of admin and loads of laundry and whatever, like, are you going to take 20 minutes just to go for a walk outside without your phone
Yeah.
and just walk around the block and those sorts of things? And when I was recovering from my mastectomy, my biggest fear, because I am the most busy person, was that I would do too much and compromise my ability to come back to the sport. So I allowed myself to do one thing a day. And I was like, I got to do one fun thing. And that was someone comes to visit, or I, go for a coffee or walk around the block or whatever it was. But like it was almost limiting myself to not overdo it and trying to say no,
Yeah.
which sounds like a weird thing to do, but actually sometimes you need to say no, and I'm terrible at saying no.
Yeah. It's
So
giving
yeah,
yourself
protecting my impact.
permission, isn't it? Sometimes you need to give yourself permission to say no, because if you're not good at that, which I'm the same, and I was the same, I learnt that as well. Really important when to say no, because otherwise you burn out.
Totally. And I found so many people, perhaps because obviously I was quite public about it, who reached out to me and said, oh, let's get a coffee. I hope you're doing okay. And people want to kind of, you know, give you their time and everything. But when you are like mentally exhausted, especially when I was in weekly treatment, I sort of had 48 hours a week that I was like on good form. And I felt like at least one of them should go to Sam, my husband. So I was down to like one day, and you had to be really picky with your time. And actually, I think being really honest with people is totally fine. And I've tried to kind of take that into, now we're in a really busy period with rowing, and some friends I hadn't seen in a while were lovely, and they were like, love to catch you over for dinner. And my immediate thing was like, yeah. And then I was like, do you know what? Literally got 3 weeks until I disappear for 2 months. My weekends are packed, and then you just go back and you just go like, I'm so sorry. I would love to see you. Genuinely, I know this sounds ridiculous, but how does October look? And they're like, okay, yeah, you're being honest and you're not burning out. And I think that's a really good skill to have.
Yeah, no, I agree. And also the thing you said about enjoying the moment rather than just looking at the final goal, that keeps coming up in these podcast chats time and time again, how people have learned the importance of that. So I love that point as well. And I'd love people to kind of hear that, just to make sure that we are enjoying the present, enjoying the process, and it's not always about the final goal.
Totally. And I think, that my diagnosis really, really kind of highlight that for me as well, is that, if you put yourself in a position where something like this comes up, you are facing a moment of adversity. And if you go, oh, I would change this and I would change this and I wouldn't do this anymore, I wouldn't do this anymore. Like, why are you doing it now? If that doesn't bring you joy or, and help you, and it drains you and all that sort of thing, then like, think about what does give me joy? What do I enjoy? And try and, fill your time with a little bit more of that, because you really don't know what's around the corner.
Yeah, 100%. Erin, do you see yourself as a resilient person?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think I always thought I was. I think my most resilient weekend of my life was in Serbia that weekend. And I remember pushing off. I literally had landed.
That was the World Cup, yeah, just after your diagnosis.
Yeah, the World Cup. Yeah, like the 4 days. Well, I flew out the day after my diagnosis. And I rode that afternoon. So I flew mid-morning, got there, rode at about 4 o'clock. And I remember pushing off, and I was like, I'm 99% sure that I can do this. I can hold this together. I can do a good job. And then I remember rowing up being like, oh, I hope I'm right. Thinking, I've really got to put my money where my mouth is now. And thankfully, it did all go well. I didn't mess up. I did my job. But I think that's when I sort of confirmed that, like, yeah, okay, I think I am pretty solid.
Do you think you're good at sport due to your innate resilience, or do you think sport has made you more resilient, or do you think this cancer diagnosis has made you more resilient?
That's a really good question. I think I was pretty resilient before sport. I think, but I think resilience comes hand in hand with there's a bit of self-confidence. And also a bit of sort of determination and a kind of, like a bit of a power behind resilience. I think you need to have an understanding of sort of what you're doing and why you're doing it. I think you need to be quite self-aware, and I think sport has helped me become far more self-aware than I ever was before, because I think you work with a psychologist, obviously, and you kind of dig into some of these things. But I think it's understanding what your why is, and, what your weaknesses are, your kind of overplayed strengths, what your strengths are. And I think being part of a team also kind of helps, because on a day when you're feeling 4 out of 10, you've got someone who's an 8 out of 10 who kind of gives you a bit of energy of theirs. And I think sports definitely trained my resilience and helped me to kind of maybe tap into it more proactively. Through different strategies and just through kind of, having goals.
Yeah, amazing. And final question, Erin. If you could go back in time to when things were at their toughest, what do you wish you could have told yourself as you were going through that tough time?
I think I would just say, like, everything's going to be okay. Like, try and just relax and trust the people around you. And I think I learnt, I'm going to say probably like 2 or 3 chemos in, to kind of finally just relax and trust everyone, trust the professionals. And it's not that I didn't, but you know, I'd come from an environment where it's all about, as you said, controlling the controllables, pushing and, you know, doing your best and being on the front foot all the time. And actually I went from being like a kind of leader within my group and, you know, kind of at the top of my game, to all of a sudden being incredibly vulnerable, which can cause you to be quite defensive and like, okay, well, should I do this? I don't know, and everything. And I kind of just wish that I could have just relaxed a bit more and being like, you are so well looked after. The people around you are for you. And you know, they're doing everything they can to make you better. And I think that probably would have probably made the start of chemo and that waiting period and everything just that little bit better.
Yeah. Well, you know, you've done brilliantly. Where can people find you, Erin, if they want to know more?
I mean, I'm really active on Instagram. Erin MWJ, my maiden name. And I'm really active on Instagram. I am still sharing loads of what I've kind of both been through and kind of what's coming up. So it's probably a lovely kind of cross section of sport, rowing and cancer, and trying to kind of help people understand that actually, a little bit like, you know, when you have a baby, you're in the 4th trimester, a little bit like I think when you have cancer, just because I got the all clear doesn't mean that I'm back to normal. We're still kind of navigating a lot of different things. And so I'm trying to kind of keep bringing awareness, keep kind of encouraging people to live life joyfully, and kind of sharing my experiences as I work towards Paris next year.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you, Erin, for coming to chat to us. I actually saw a reel you posted on Instagram, which, you know, brought a tear to my eye, I'm not going to lie, where you wrote, and you've just said it, you wrote, "Life is a privilege, take it with both hands, make it wonderful." And it appears that you are absolutely doing that. So please do keep doing that. And I personally look forward to watching your onward journey to Paris 2024. So thank you.
Thank you so much.